We are so appreciative to each of you for joining us here today. My name is Laura Lothman-Lambert, and I'm the Juvenile Director here at the State Attorney's Office. Nearly 2 years ago, almost to this day, representatives from 22 law enforcement agencies across Clay, Duval, and Nassau counties and community stakeholders came together in support of expanding and enhancing the Juvenile Civil Citation Program. They signed an agreement pledging to that partnership. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with the program, Juvenile Civil Citation is an arrest alternative for youth who commit certain misdemeanor and municipal ordinance offenses. Instead of an arrest that is costly to both the taxpayer and the juvenile, qualified young offenders are instead given a citation to enter the teen court program that administers sanctions to youth for their behavior. Civil citations promote accountability, immediate intervention, and swift consequences to young offenders, doing so without an arrest and entrance into the criminal justice system, which studies show increases the likelihood that a young person will enter the system again. Civil citation saves taxpayer dollars, it increases public safety. And best of all, the program is working. In the 2 years since all of these committed partners signed this agreement to expand the use of the Smart Justice Initiative, we have seen some impressive results. The Times-Union reported last year that we are poised to be a state leader in civil citation based on a statewide analysis. Since that article was published, the Fourth Circuit has continued to be a top performer in the state in issuance of civil citations to eligible youth. More important than headlines, however, we know that youth who receive citations are far, far less likely to reoffend, which improves long-term community health and public safety outcomes throughout the circuit. These youth participate in meaningful community service, they write reflections on their behavior, they hear from community members who talk about them and about the effect their behaviors had on greater society. In some instances, they meet with the victim who tells them directly how they were hurt by that conduct. The Teen Court program has dollars available to provide mental health and drug treatment services at no additional cost to the family. And according to Department of Juvenile Justice data, 96% of youth who receive a civil citation instead of an arrest do not reoffend within a year of completing the program. Before we move on to the event at hand, and on behalf of State Attorney Melissa Nelson, I would like to thank a few people in attendance whose commitment to the civil citation program have contributed to these successes. We have a number of law enforcement partners in the room. Without them, this program would not be where it is today. We have members of the staff of teen courts, which we are so grateful for them joining us. We have a representative from iCare today. iCare was an instrumental organization in bringing civil citation to the forefront of community conversation about its value and its importance. And general members of the community who support children and children program services. Thank you all for being here today. Now, let's hear a little bit more about civil citations from some of the people who are extremely familiar with them. I would like to introduce to you our panelists who have graciously set aside some time this morning to talk about progress, challenges, and the future of the program. To my left, we have Simone Marstiller, who is the new Department of Juvenile Justice Secretary. We have State Attorney Melissa Nelson, State Attorney of the 4th Judicial Circuit. We have the Sheriff Mike Williams, the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. Stacy Peterson, the Teen Court Director here in Duval County. And finally, we have Rob Mason, who is the Director of the Juvenile Division of the 4th Circuit Public Defender's Office. Thank you all so much. The first question I have is for everyone. And because the process does start with law enforcement, I would like to start with you, Sheriff Williams. What is your organization's role in the civil citation process?
So, good morning, and thanks for having us out and for hosting the event this morning. So, our role in the process is obviously we are the gateway, so to speak. So we're the issuer of the citation. We had, as when I came into office, that was an issue that we wanted to begin to tackle and look at. We had not felt like we had issued enough citations. We're not leveraged the program effectively enough, and so it was a process for us to get to this point. A lot of help from the state attorney's office, obviously, in helping coordinate and pulling everybody on board. But, quickly said, we are really the gatekeepers and the gateway, so to speak, for issuing the citations. And while we believe discretion with the officers is incredibly important, we knew that if we did, and we'll talk about this more later, if we did educate the officers and let them know about the process and talk about restorative justice, that I felt pretty strongly that having been a member of the agency for more than 20 plus years, 25 years, that they would buy off on that. I just didn't think they had enough, we had not had enough conversation internally about those processes like that. And so once we did, it was an easy transition for us to be able to start using the citation, getting over some technical hurdles that we discovered. But really, we as not just the JSO but law enforcement in general, sort of the gateway into the process.
Great. Stacy, after a civil citation is issued, what is your organization's role in shepherding these youth through the program?
At Teen Court, we receive the civil citation directly from the law enforcement agencies, and we work with the youth and the family to help guide them through an individualized 90-day pre-arrest diversion program. And our goals are to promote accountability and responsibility with these youth. We're working to help make reparations to the affected communities and work with the victims of the individual offenses. And we're also there to, where indicated, work on underlying issues that these youth are dealing with to help them to hopefully avoid future unlawful or antisocial behaviors.
Rob, from the perspective of the Public Defender's Office, what do you see as your role in this process?
Our role is to keep the civil citation process going. And I want to give a big shout out to Sheriff Williams and State Attorney Melissa Nelson, because if you look at the data from the civil citation dashboard for the last full period of the prior administration, we were 46% below the state average. Now we are 33% above the state average. And if you look at best practices, the memorandum of understanding from 2 years ago is listed there. So there were a lot of members of the community that made this happen, but I just can't give enough praise to Ms. Nelson and Sheriff Williams, because we are now one of the leaders, and to go from the bottom to the top is exceptional.
Melissa, what do you feel is the State Attorney's Office role in making sure that the civil citation program is as successful as it is?
Thanks, Laura. So a couple of years ago, when we all got around the table in the courthouse next door to us just to talk about the issue, we asked the question, we just had an open dialogue to every agency, to law enforcement, to Teen Court, what do you want, what do you need? And Teen Court told the State Attorney's Office something that was information to me. They said, please get out of the way. We were historically, if a law enforcement officer saw fit to actually write a citation before that youth could actually go to Teen Court, a file was being opened at the State Attorney's Office, and we were reviewing that decision by law enforcement to decide to essentially bless it. And we could reverse it if we didn't think the law enforcement officer's decision was appropriate. The reason that civil citation and its attendant programs actually works is because of the swiftness of consequences. I always say, when one of my kids lies to me, I don't say, hey, get back with me in 6 months and we're going to decide what your punishment is. The punishment is swift, and the sanction is, and that matters. And so that's why this program works. So us, the office being in the pipeline, was an obstacle. It slowed down the program and it mitigated that positive outcome. So we listened to that, and we took our office out of the administrative pipeline. Our role now is Laura's unit, the juvenile unit, reviews arrest when a civil citation is not issued by a law enforcement officer. And in the cases where they say, hey, this kid was actually eligible for a citation and the officer didn't write it, they then communicate directly with the officer, which is a huge change. They send an email just to let the officer know, hey, do you know, this is also improving on the education and training piece, that this is a tool available to you, and that this youth was otherwise eligible. In some cases, we believe about discretion as well. The officer may have a very good reason why he or she decided to arrest in lieu of issuance of a citation. But if they don't know, then this is an opportunity for the state attorney's office to educate our law enforcement partners. So that's the role that we serve now. We're no longer looking over the shoulder of the judgment of our law enforcement partners. We're really in a support role, I think, of this program.
Secretary Marstiller, welcome. Thank you again for being here. From your perspective, what is the role of the Department of Juvenile Justice in talking about and educating the community on civil citation?
First of all, thank you all for having me today. I'm pleased to have any opportunity to talk about civil citation and its positive effects, and I'm certainly happy to celebrate the success that you all have achieved here in the 4th Judicial Circuit. So from DJJ's perspective, I think our roles, there are 3 primarily in the process and in the program. First is for each child, and because that is what they are, for each child who receives a civil citation, a risk assessment or a needs assessment is done. Because we want to make sure that even as he or she is getting those swift consequences to teach accountability, we also want to make sure that we're addressing any other issues that might be going on. So is there substance abuse? Is there need for anger management classes? Are there other behavioral issues? Might there be some mental health issues? And so each child receives an assessment, and that assessment is initially approved by the assessment instrument, I guess I should call it, is approved by DJJ. So that's our role in the actual process. Beyond that, though, I think our biggest role is collecting the data. Because we know, certainly in law enforcement and in juvenile justice, we know that data is what drives the best decisions. And data is only as good as the data we receive, and we manage it, we collect it. I think you heard mention of a civil citation dashboard on the DJJ website. And it's interactive, so at any moment, if someone in this room had a laptop open and was on our website, could go to the dashboard and pull up, 12 months worth of data on the 4th Circuit and see exactly what amazing work has been done here. And that data, I think, helps to inform other parts of the state who, I'm not saying that everyone hasn't bought into it. I think that civil citation really has been embraced, but the more we can get the information to them showing that it works, and I think that is a primary responsibility of my agency, and I'm hoping to be more proactive about it and pushing the information out to our stakeholders and our partners across the state, as opposed to waiting for folks to log on to our website and find it themselves. The more we can get the information out, I think the more people across the state will see that this works, that it's important to, very quickly give a consequence. But the more we keep kids out of the criminal justice system, the more likely they are to go on and have productive lives and steer clear of it later. The third thing we also do is basically provide technical assistance. So we have a best practices manual, which indeed does include a copy of the Memorandum of Understanding that the stakeholders signed on to here in the 4th Judicial Circuit. So we're also a resource for information and assistance.
Thank you. The next question is for Sheriff Williams. Sheriff, what are some of the successes that you've seen take place in the 2 years since the implementation of the Memorandum of Understanding?
I think the number one success has just been the use of the program and the expanse of it over time. So we had set a goal to be, I can't remember what month we started in, but we had set a goal for about a year later to be at least at 60% issuance of citations for eligible juveniles, with the end goal, and didn't have a timetable for that, to be up over 90%. And within that first goal time period, so to speak, we were already up over 90%. So for us internally, it told me that we had done a good job of communicating up and down the chain of command, the value of the program, making officers comfortable with the program. You know, that it wasn't just a citation that you issued, the juvenile walked away, this thing just disappeared, but what the process was after they got the citation. And really some immediate buy-in from, you know, line level patrol officers all the way again up the chain of command to, hey, that's a good idea, that's what we should do. And you know, in terms of success, I think that's for us the one that just always rises to the top of the list. So we were grappling with some low numbers in the beginning and couldn't really figure out, you know, what the hurdle was. We would do surveys inside the agency, formal, informal, and, you know, everybody's in agreement that this should work, but we just weren't, you know, the numbers weren't reflecting that. So we were actually in a group of sergeants, first line supervisors, and just in general conversation, one of the sergeants said, well, you know, if the printer in the car would print the citation, we would probably issue more. And we were like, what did you say? And so we figured out that it's true, it didn't print, so it was go to the substation, you know, 3-hour process to write a citation, and that was not appealing to a lot of people. So we eventually could never get the printer issue fixed, and we went back to handwritten citations so that we could begin to issue obviously issue the citations, and the numbers immediately went up. So we did a lot less training and convincing and arm twisting than I even anticipated inside the agency. It was really just a matter of exposing them to what the process was, to restorative justice concepts, and immediate buy-in. You know, so for me internally, the way the agency accepted it and began to use it is the biggest success for us.
And if I understand correctly, you were really instrumental in that, in having meetings with your, you know, not just the top level of your administration, but also what you just referenced to, even more on the ground, to really understand and to stay on top of who was and who wasn't issuing citations.
Correct. You know, one of the challenges, again, were, you know, the anonymous survey data we're getting back says everybody agrees, but nothing was happening. So where's the gap? And so we went on a journey to try to figure out what the challenge was, and it really became that one technical issue that was holding us back initially. But again, we had done a lot of work at that point to make sure that, again, the officers understood the process, and it was an easy turnaround once we got over that hurdle.
Great, thanks. Stacy, from your perspective as the director of teen court, what have been some of the successes that you have seen with students, youth coming through teen court?
Well, very similar to what Sheriff Williams said, you know, it's been a prime example of interagency cooperation that has been really, truly refreshing. Right from the start, when Ms. Nelson brought everybody to the table for input, this MOU was written with everyone's thoughts in mind, with everyone's agency in mind. So I think it worked for everyone right from the beginning. So we had buy-in from the top all the way down to the bottom. So it flowed pretty easily, and immediately the citation numbers picked up. I think that shows to the kids in the program as well. They're getting more exposure to law enforcement in different ways than they have before. We have law enforcement that sit on our restorative justice boards, so they're getting to interact in that respect as well. I just think that there's a common goal between all of the agencies, which doesn't always happen that often. So everyone wants to see these kids get better, we want to see our communities safer, and we're helping these youth get some services and have a clean record.
Melissa, from the state attorney's perspective, why are civil citations so important for our community?
So I think today's worthy of talking about, not just because issuance is up, because that's obviously a good thing, that was a goal of all of ours, but if that issuance went up doesn't matter if these kids are reoffending. It's really the outcomes of, and that's how we know restorative justice and teen court is working effectively, because the recidivism data, you can't argue with it. If only 4% reoffend in the next year, and 96% of the youth do not intersect with the justice system again, that's just a result. you can't argue with. That data is tremendous. And so I really believe that it's not just in part that the issuance is up, it's that what we're seeing in terms of the positive outcomes, because as the Secretary said, well, we all agree here, our goal, we want to keep kids out of the justice system. And this is a way to do that. And I know this is not responsive to your question, but I do want to say, to Stacy's point, this really is a true example of collaboration and what can happen when people work and agencies work in partnership together as opposed to in silos. Because just getting around the table and talking and then emails, everybody had input into this and had thoughts, and really good thoughts about how to make this work. And then stayed engaged since 2 years ago about tweaking this. So we came together again through email, but what's working, what's not, and I think that's really important.
Great, thanks. Rob, I mean, one of the things that we talk about a lot with civil citation is cost savings. You know, the fact that we're saving money not just with officer time and kids being put through the justice system, but also long-term cost savings of them not coming into the justice system. Rob, from your perspective, what impact do civil citations have towards case counts, resource distribution, et cetera, things that you see in your office now that less kids are coming through the system on misdemeanor offenses?
Well, with civil citation in place, we won't see most of these children. Before, what would happen is children would be arrested, and we would have to open up the file and assign the case to an attorney and devote the resources to the case. But with civil citations, we don't see them unless they fail. If they do fail the program, they are held accountable. And with that process, we're able to devote more time for the children that have higher needs, because most of the civil citation children don't have especially high needs. They have needs, and some of them have significant needs, but we get to focus more on the children that need more help.
Secretary Marstiller, how does the Fourth Circuit compare to the rest of the state with regard to our civil citation program?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. Because this is a success story, folks. Earlier I was talking about data, and the data are important because the right information drives decision making. The civil citation program is based on research and data that shows if you intervene quickly and early enough with the right, element of accountability and the right, interventions, it works and it keeps kids out of the juvenile justice system. So, for the Fourth Circuit, and this information comes from DJJ's civil citation dashboard, just to give you a comparison of where we were and where we are now. So this, before the MOU was signed, so fiscal year 2015-16, I think looks like there was about 25% usage of civil citation for kids who are eligible for civil citation. In fiscal year 2017-18, this would be right around the time that the MOU was signed. That jumped to 16-17, it went up to 40%. We're still not quite there yet. Fiscal year 17-18, 78%. That's a huge increase in a year's time, and I don't even think that the MOU had been in existence for a full year. That is a testament to the collaboration and the conversations that had to be had before that MOU could be entered into. That speaks to the understanding of the signatories to that memo, that we understand what the goal is, which is to keep kids out of the system and reduce recidivism as much as we possibly can. So now, where are we? For the 12-month period from April 2018 to March 2019, 81% in Circuit 4, 81% of eligible youth are receiving civil citations. And we are at about 4 to 5% recidivism, which is the most successful program, you know, if we're talking about prevention that we have. The reality is, folks, that the farther a youth goes into the justice system, the higher the likelihood that he or she is going to recidivate, notwithstanding the fact that we treat all of the, you know, the mental health issues and the substance abuse issues. So we know from data and experience that the key is to keep them out of the system in the first place. And it is working amazingly here. And I am grateful to the partners, the drivers of this, because it's a great example, again, for others in the state, I think, to follow.
Thank you. One last question for either Sheriff Williams or Stacy, because I think you guys both know this, kind of have this information best. What are some challenges that you see and ways that we can do even better going forward from this date on?
So I'll go first. Actually, we're doing great right now. So but we're always going to have challenges as it moves forward. For us internally, we've got a lot of new officers, and so we've got to make sure that we stay focused and keep our eye on the ball when it comes to training. And I think the best, you know, the data will show us that. We're doing that now, but if we should see a decline, I think that's one area where we have to make sure that we're bringing new officers in. And we're doing it in the academy, but it's got to be reinforced on the street that we are continuing down this path, that it's not just a splash and then we move on, but make it part of the culture of how we do business in the organization. And so in doing that and having so much turnover, that's one of the challenges that we look at, is making sure that the new staff coming in is trained up initially, and that level of training across the board is maintained. And I say training, really level of understanding that this process works. Here's what it's all about. Here's why it works. And making sure that's continually communicated inside the agency.
For teen court, the biggest challenge by far has been that the increase in issued citations means a hefty increase in referrals and youth coming through the program. Basically, by expanding the scope of the charges that are eligible to receive a civil citation means that we've had an enormous increase in intakes coming through. In 2016, we had half as many intakes as we did in 2018, so that's a whole lot of additional kids. We feel really strongly that intensive case management is probably the key component to helping these kids to be successful. And to do that, you need to have people to do the case management. So our biggest challenge is to have enough case managers to work with these kids. So we're in the process of seeking funding to get a couple more case managers. And we also combat this by working with a lot of different community agencies to provide a lot of our clinical and therapeutic services.
Thanks, Stacy. We also wanted to show you a human side of civil citation from both, from really the youth perspective on what participation in teen court can mean. When youth enter the program, they often write letters to the officers who issued them a citation explaining how the program has impacted them. In an effort to be sensitive to the privacy of those youth who have completed the program, instead of asking them to be here today or instead of them being here today, we asked several if we could read their perspective from the program in their own words. And so, Sheriff Williams, I think all of you should have a letter in front of you in your packet. If you could just take a moment to find that. And if Sheriff Williams, you could read your letter first, that would be great.
Sure. So, Dear Officer Johnson, I would like to thank you for considering me for the Juvenile Civil Citation Program, since I had not been in trouble with the law before. I understand that the situation could have gone very differently for me, and I could have been in a lot more trouble. I really appreciate you taking the time and giving me solid advice. Your very positive influence on me, and this citation has made me reflect on what I did. I'm certain that you had other calls that you could have been responding to, yet you spent a great deal of time on my case. I have a greater respect for authority, and I am determined to stay out of trouble. I have plans for a great future in the military. Being a firefighter or a business owner, and a blemish on my criminal record would not have been good. Thank you so much, and stay safe. Signed, SM. So can I add to that just a minute? I had an opportunity, and we take the opportunity to go to the neighborhood accountability boards and watch that process. And that was one of the things that we drove some of the people inside the agency that had questions. too. And obviously we have a lieutenant that sits on those boards as well. The letters are a piece of it, but to go to that board and watch that process, if you are not a believer, it will immediately change your mind. That this is a much better process than going to a courtroom, being in there for a minute, walking out, not really understanding what just happened, have somebody to explain it to you, again, 6 months later. A much more effective way to address that. And I think letters like this and some of the other things they do, show the impact it has on the young people.
Thank you. Rob, would you please read your letter?
Yes. Dear officer, I just wanted to let you know that I am so thankful to have a person like you with me at that time of my life. I wanted to let you know how much that meant by handling things the way you did. That was such a scary moment in my life, and with your help, I was able to understand what it meant. And you didn't have to do what you did. It was so nice how you explained things and told me what was wrongdoing. I know that you probably get letters like this all the time, but I really want you to know that you're a great person at what you do. I'm also very sorry for wasting your time that night and having to make you come out there and do all that paperwork. Making sure that I wasn't going to do anything stupid. I hope that you get a chance to read this.
Stacy.
Dear officer, I wanted to thank you for giving me a civil citation and letting me go to this program instead of arresting me. I also wanted to thank you for being nice to me. The program helped me realize what I did wrong and how things could have gone very bad really fast. I apologize to the stores that I stole from, and I meant every word of it, and I'm being punished for my actions. I also apologize to my mom for doing wrong, disappointing her, and going against everything that she taught. I taught my little brother that stealing is wrong, and I hope that it doesn't have any effect on him in the future. Thank you for helping me find the right way. From AW.
Secretary Marstiller.
So my letter reads, I would like to thank the law enforcement officer at the Navy Exchange for not arresting me. I am beyond grateful to have received the citation instead. I believe everyone should get a second chance, and I'm thankful to have gotten the chance to redeem myself with this program. This has been a very eye-opening experience for me. I wasn't making good decisions, and I was being selfish. This program has taught me so much about what's right and wrong and being a good member of society. I've benefited so much from this program, it has made me a better and more aware person. Before all of this, I had no idea what I wanted to do in the future. Now, I know I'm very interested in marine biology, law, and teaching English. I think getting into college packet was honestly what I needed because I'm a junior in high school, and if I want to go to college, I need to have a plan. The career essay was very difficult for me because, like I said, I honestly had no clue what I wanted to do in the future. Although difficult, I learned a lot about myself and what I'm actually interested in. Both of the online courses I did were very helpful. The decision-making one really taught me a lot and made me think of what I really value in life. As for the drug and alcohol one, I learned so much. I became very aware of the dangerous effects, especially on a teenager. I'm honestly really glad I got the jury duty as part of my citation. Going into it, I thought I'd be miserable, but afterwards, I thought it was kind of fun and very interesting. I actually have been considering going back after my citations to volunteer, now that I know I have an interest in law. There's a lot of changes I'm going to have to make, but I'm willing to do it. No more partying, no more hanging out with bad influences, and definitely no more shoplifting. The social aspect has been hard for me because I like being friends with everyone, but I also want to be a good influence and help people understand the lifelong consequences of what they're doing. I'm going to be a better person for myself, my family, my friends, and society. I hope you can accept my apology. I want to once again thank you for this eye-opening opportunity. And that's from NI. That's an amazing letter.
If I could just add that young person does volunteer with us now.
That's fantastic.
And Melissa, your letter.
Before I read, I just want to say this is what we call the feedback loop, and this is a very essential component to the success of this program. We live in a time where our society is actually very thankless to the people who protect us. And it's funny that one of the letter writers suggested that officers get notes like this all the time. This is actually, I would say, I don't know, I'm not one, but probably very rare. And what we have found at our office is that the officers who are receiving these letters, it is instilling confidence in the program, both in informing them of the outcome and giving them confidence the next time they're faced with a decision, citation or not, that they see firsthand the value of this program. So I think this feedback loop is an essential component. And I think it's also important that the power of saying I'm sorry is really important to the offender as well, to the youth. My letter reads, Dear Police Officer, I'd like to start by expressing my greatest gratitude for saving my future. I have ambitions and big dreams, and the bad decision I made could have ruined that, but you saw something in me. To most, I would have just looked like a criminal, but you looked past all of that and saw the real me. For that, I am eternally grateful. Your kindness and calmness kept me sane during that time, and that is something that I will never forget. Your actions have aided me in seeing what went wrong and what I needed to do to fix it. The program, Teen Court, has tremendously showed me that my dreams are attainable. I just need to stay out of trouble. Again, thank you for not arresting me and giving me a second chance. It has changed me into a better person because I now know the consequences of my actions. They don't only affect me, but everyone around me as well. Sincerely, DG.
Thank you again to our panelists for taking the time to be with us today, and thank all of you for joining us. If their schedule allows, I will open up the panel for a few questions. Yeah.
Do you see areas where adults could benefit from something similar like this, like I guess drug court or veterans court are examples, kind of collaboration and a quick response of having with kids, maybe with adults as well?
Yeah, so we've looked at and are continuing to look at a similar option for adults. I think the idea, though, of diversion, what you just mentioned for, whatever particular group, whether it's mental health court, drug court, veterans court, those type of things, I think that's important. So if this is a good example of using that, that gateway to the system, so to speak, to try to find the root cause of what's driving the behavior. Sometimes you're not going to be able to impact that. We all realize that, but many times you can. So if there is if there's an ability to, through some counseling or through some treatment of some sort, to stop that individual from, engaging in those behaviors, I think everybody's all for it. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what we want. So all of those ideas are good ideas. It's the nuts and bolts of putting them in place. Sometimes it can be challenging. But this is a good example of if everybody's on the same page and this is what we really want to do, we can get it done.
So Mike, from our vantage point, you're sitting next to Coral Messina, who has just been named in our office. We created a new position titled Smart Justice Coordinator, and she is charged with overseeing all of our diversion programming and our alternatives, alternative treatment courts, and looking at them just as we did with juvenile civil citation. It taught us a lot, the exercise we went through, to look at every program to determine the eligibility. The source, is it statutory? Is it by administrative order that determines that eligibility? And are we as prosecutors coming into contact, obviously, with defendants, are we referring to the maximum, are we using the opportunity available to us for these treatment courts to maximum opportunity? So she's going to be looking top to bottom at all of that, because we really want, and I don't speak for the sheriff, but I know that we're aligned with this. We know that programming and case management can work and alternatives to the system can have better outcomes. And so if we know that to be true, we need to really study how we can avail ourselves to those alternatives, to the best extent possible.
Anybody else? One more question, maybe?
Sheriff, could you speak to the cost savings to your department as a result of the time that's required to issue a civil citation as opposed to an actual arrest, and what an officer is able to do as a result? And also, Secretary, could you speak to the cost savings to the system generally that is saved as a result of a civil citation as opposed to having to go through the court
obviously we have been keenly focused in the last couple of years about trying to maximize, officers' time. And I think this, not only with the civil citation, but all of these diversionary type programs, if we can create enough time to have the officers on the street focus on what is a big challenge for our community, some of the other things that really need the time and attention of a law enforcement officer, and the skills that they bring to address some of those issues. I think it's important. It's been a success. I don't have a number here with me today, but absolutely it's been just in the again, being able to turn that officer around and get him back engaged in service. We have dealt with staffing issues around here forever, so all of these efficiencies that we build in, while it's important to us, I think the bigger piece is getting, again, diverting this youth away from the program, all of that, but in terms of peripheral benefit to the program, and maybe a top, for some people, maybe this is the top reason to do it, but it does save time. Time is money, obviously, and we are able to focus our resources on areas that, again, in my opinion, need the time and attention of a law enforcement officer.
From my perspective, of course, I don't think that DJJ collects all of that cost-saving data, but I'm going to just sort of say I think you might have given me an assignment. Because I am curious to know really what it boils down to in dollars and cents across the state. I have anecdotal information. As the sheriff just said, it's certainly a time saver for law enforcement officers on the street. We're saving judicial and court resources because judicial proceedings take time. You've got the judge's time, you've got court reporters, the whole deal. One thing I can tell you though from DJJ's perspective, if one of these kids were went through the whole process and were committed to my department's care, right, to residential commitment, it's costing probably $300 a day to feed, house, treat, rehabilitate that youth for a period of, it can be 9 months, 12 months, 18 months, it just depends. So from that perspective, look at how much we're saving by putting in as much effort and time as we can into this program to keep those youth from becoming, a big cost to the state later. That to me is the biggest eye-opener.
Thank you all again for coming. We do have a flyer that we've put together. We didn't want to spend our time on statistics, but we wanted to give you some information to take with you. So please have a look at this flyer that does talk about data and does talk about some cost savings in there. Additionally, we have copies of our annual report that talk about all of the things the state attorney's office has been doing over 2018. So please do take a copy of that with you. And otherwise, thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to seeing how this program continues to be successful in the next 2 years, and we will certainly keep everyone posted on how things are progressing. Thank you very much.